Well, hey, what's up? My name is Tony, and I'm a filmmaker photographer in the St. Louis area. Glad you are watching. Today, we're talking about the EOS R5C. And what I'm going to do is tell you some of the things that I'm really excited about with this camera, maybe some of the things that I'm not crazy about, and then talk about who do I think this camera's for and if I personally am going to get one. Right now, we are shooting on the EOS R6. I've also got the R5 here with me. I bought that one basically when it came out, and I've been using these two cameras a lot since they've been released. So this R5C is a big deal for me. I also have a lot of experience with Canon's Cine line, and that's going to come into a little bit of play with kind of my thoughts about this camera. So let's talk about just some of the basic changes that they've added. The big one is the 8K 60, which has some limitations, but personally, I don't think that that's Canon crippling. I think that that's just shoving 8K RAW into a tiny camera like this. But they did give it to us, which is really cool. 8K 60. I personally don't know of any other camera like in this kind of price point or this size, that can even shoot that high of resolution. They also updated the hot shoe to have the same one as the R3 so that you can use some of those other supported accessories. They also added built-in internal cooling, which is a big deal because one of the reasons that we've struggled with the R5 and the R6 is the overheating big problem that has ruined this camera. You can't even shoot video on it, even though we're shooting video on them right now. I personally haven't had hardly any trouble with overheating at all. I've shot weddings, I've shot videos, I've shot commercial, all sorts of different things with these cameras, and I really haven't had trouble with them overheating. But let's keep talking about the EOS R5C. That has the same basic size and form factor as the R5, except for it has that internal fan on the back of it. Another big thing that they added that a lot of people haven't really talked about is the dual ISO. So your ISO for video is at 800 and also at 3200, which brings that noise level down once you start getting into lower light. Another thing that they did is they added a different button to switch from photo and video, which we're going to talk about that quite a bit in just a minute. And then they kept all of the photo side of the R5 and they shoved that into this camera as well. Now, here's my thoughts on why they did what they did. And I'm not a genius. I don't have any connections with Canon really. But these are just kind of the reasons that I think that Canon did what they did, because there's a lot of people that were really struggling with the fact that they removed IBIS, and the autofocus on the video is so drastically different than the R5, and they didn't update the HDMI port and all of these things and the external power for the 8K 60, and you get really hung up on all of these little tiny things that have been changed. And some people say that they took everything that was great about the R5 and they removed it, which just is not true. It's not true at all. Now, from a person who uses Canon cinema cameras, that's the view that I'm having. I'm not coming from just like a YouTube, like sitting in my room making talking head videos. Like I use like cinema cameras to make videos every day. So that's kind of the perspective that I have. And just talking about some of these things that I've seen Canon done, I think it's really smart the way that they released this camera. Now, one thing that we need to remember is that we are in the middle of a pandemic where there is just a shortage of literally everything. It doesn't matter if it's toilet paper or bagels or cameras or computers. Every company that is releasing new products are struggling to get them out. But you have to continue in the midst of a crisis to innovate and market and continue your growth. So that you can continue on. So with that in mind, those are some of the reasons why I think that Canon tried to keep as much as possible from the EOS R5. Now, it's still an R5, it just has a little C on there. So, like, I understand why they didn't change the HDMI port. That means that they would have to create a whole new body, they would have to create new, this whole thing would have to be changed. What they did is they tried to keep as much as they could on this camera. So they took the majority of this camera and then they added a fan on the back of it, which makes total sense because they've been producing parts for this EOS R5 for a while now. They've been producing the bulk of this camera, and if they can just make tiny tweaks like adding that external fan on the back or internal fan on the back, then they're going to be able to produce more cameras faster. So I think that takes care of some of the reasons why, like, I personally think that they didn't just like start developing a brand new camera, but they took the one that they've have and they made it more video centric. Another complaint that I saw was that it only had the quarter 20 on the bottom and didn't have the bigger 3/8 like the C70 has. All of those things kind of go back to the fact it's like we're in the middle of a pandemic, and for them to release a completely brand new camera, I don't think that it's smart because we're not going to see that camera that much longer because of production issues. All right, so let's talk about the IBIS. I know that's a huge like conversation right now about this camera. And me personally, I am 100% okay with no IBIS on a camera that is more geared for video. And the reason why is that, like, it's really great for photos. You can handhold like a picture up to like 3 seconds. Like, it's great. It's incredible. But as soon as I flipped over to video, I was constantly fighting that wobble and the background gets all wobbly, and I just was not very happy with it. And using the C70 lately, I've really enjoyed using the electronic stabilization that's built into that camera. And me personally, like, I would prefer to have the electronic stabilization than I would the physical IBIS. Now, there's all sorts of options. Why couldn't they have just given us a switch to turn off and on the IBIS? I don't know, but like personally, I'm okay with not having IBIS in the EOS R5 C because, like, the R5 and the R6 are the first cameras I've ever had IBIS. I don't really care. Like, most of my lenses that I have image stabilization built in because, like, I am a videographer and I want to use my lenses for more than just photo. And so I always had that lens stabilization in mind when I was purchasing lenses. Really, the only one that I don't have is the 50mm f1.2. That one doesn't have image stabilization. And to be honest, I've been like using, if I'm doing pro jobs like where we are using the cameras to their full potential, it's on a gimbal. And I know that a lot of people don't like gimbals and they want that handheld look. I personally really enjoy these smaller cameras like this for on like gimbal work and lots of movement and things like that, opposed to the handheld kind of shaky walkie look. And if that's the case, you don't want IBIS because it just can't move fast enough with your body moving that much. So I don't understand why it's such a big deal, why we need IBIS on a cinema camera. Like, that's what this is. It's a cinema camera. It has the C. It's part of the Cine line. But it still has all the features of the R5 to take photos, which is really cool. Let's keep going. We talked about kind of that small HDMI port. As far as the 8K 60 RAW with external power, like, I understand that that's just the limitations of a small body. Like, it's shooting 8K 60. Like, and these batteries are not huge. In fact, they came out with this form factor a long time ago, but I'm really glad that they've stuck with it because I've got batteries that I've used forever, even on the 80D, the 70D, all of them use this, the old 5Ds, they all use this battery, and they've made these bigger, but I'm glad that they haven't switched it out, but it's just not a huge battery. Now, this is where I see some of the advantages of external power. If you start looking into cinema cameras and rigging out your camera and adding matte boxes and all sorts of different things, like, most of the time when you're putting rails on a camera system, you're going to have either a V mount or a gold mount battery on the back of this camera. And you're going to want to power all of your rig off of that gold mount or V mount anyways. So I assume that they'll come out with some sort of way to plug in either USB-C or external power with the little little dongle thing coming out that will be able to handle that, and you can make it a full rig, like a full cine rig, and so that whole external power thing isn't going to be a big deal, and it's really going to come down to like memory, like data is just going to be gigantic when you're talking about 8K 60. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And I just, other than that, like, man, I get so frustrated watching these videos, and people are like tearing Canon apart for making this camera. And it's like, no matter what they do, you're never going to be happy. But this is where I think that this camera is a big deal and something that we have not seen in pretty much any other camera ever, like ever. And that is the little button that they changed right here. Now they put a three slot button for the on off switch, which the reason that this is so important is in the middle it's off, on the left it's photo, and then on the right it's video. And on the photo side, everything is the same. It's all the EOS R5 with the menu systems, with the settings, with the autofocus, all of that on the photo side of it. But then when you switch it to video, you are in a cinema camera. That is a bigger deal than you know if you've ever, like if you've never used one of their cinema cameras. It's a completely different setup. And that is a really, really, really big deal to be able to have that on one camera. Now, in my perspective, there has never, ever been another hybrid camera before this. There has been photo cameras like the R5, like the A7S, all of those are photo cameras that shoot video. And then there's video cameras that don't really shoot video at all. And you've got like the Canon C70, the C200, the C300, the C500. Those are all video cameras. You cannot really, sure, you can take a screen capture, but you're still shooting it at 1/50th. You can't flip a switch and then all of a sudden you're into photos. That's a big deal for somebody like me who does both, who does all, both spectrums at the same time. Like, sure, you can take video on this photo camera, but it is not a video camera. And the reason that I'm saying that is because all of the things that are so good about the cinema cameras are now on that R5C. Like some of the things that we just really, really hated, like the fact that when you're in video mode and you hit that record button, it removes your histogram. Why are we even using a histogram in the first place? We need to be using waveforms for video. Like those are big changes that needed to happen somehow, but how are they going to do it when they're confined to using the EOS R5's menu system built on, foundationally built on a photo like ecosystem? So when they released this, just blew my mind. It's a big deal. And if you've never used that other video menu system, you're going to understand why it's such a big deal. While you are filming, you can change your white balance. You can change some of your key features. You can add zebras. You can do all of these different things in real time while you're filming, which is just not possible with that photo menu driven system. Right now, we're shooting on the EOS R6. I can see in the bottom hand corner, it says 1/50th. That is no more in Cine, because when you're using Cine, you don't use shutter speed, you use shutter angle. You use that 180-degree angle. And now when you're in video mode, you don't even have to worry about your shutter speed anymore because you set your angle and you're good to go. It's just little tweaks like that will just, I promise you, if you start using this camera, it's just going to be such a more pleasant experience shooting video than it will be on an R5 or an R6. Same thing with the autofocus. I understand that the autofocus in this camera is excellent. It is very good, but it is built for photo. And so when you flip it into video, yes, it eye tracks, but it's very jittery and it's very mechanical. What I've noticed with the C70, that's the closest thing that I imagine that it's going to like be similar to when it comes to autofocus, because the C200's autofocus was not great. It just wasn't. But they've done a lot of different versions and updates and things like that in the C70, where it has had head focusing and tracking, and it has object tracking and things like that. And what I've noticed, like things like face only tracking. So right now, this camera is just constantly always searching, always looking for my face, always looking for changes, all sorts of different things. What happens with the C70 when I'm shooting in face only mode is it locks on my face. And if it loses my face, instead of just searching and hunting and moving around and very mechanically, it just pauses the autofocus until it finds a face again, and then it focuses on that face. Those are things that make me think that the autofocus, even though it's a different autofocus and it's not the same one as the R5, Canon made the right choice by putting that on the video side of the R5C. I'm obviously excited about this camera. I could talk about it forever, and I know that you've heard all of these things before, but what I want to say to you, I think that this camera is a bigger deal than what you realize because of that hybrid menu system. It doesn't just have the R5's menu system or the C70's menu system. It has literally 2 full operating systems within this camera, which is a huge deal. And just the technological ability to be able to do this in a camera like this size is just, it's just incredible. So, I mean, obviously I'm going to buy one. I haven't pre-ordered it yet, mostly because I'm kind of saving up to replace this dinosaur. My computer is from 2017. It's still doing what I need to. It's made me a lot of money, but it is time to replace it. And I know that Apple is going to be releasing those new pro level iMacs soon. So I'm kind of holding out for that and figuring out what that is. So I'm saving up for that. I've also bought some new lenses. I bought the 100 mil. I bought the 50 millimeter f1.2. So there's like $4,000 in itself. And it's winter. I'm not shooting as much video right now. So I think I will probably get it as soon as I can. But I want to make sure that I've got my priorities straight when it comes to buying cameras. It's just crazy. It's crazy that they have a full frame cinema camera for $4,500. Just insane. A long time ago, before when all this was being rolled out, I heard a rumor that they were going to release a Super 35 C70, and then they were going to release some sort of like a C90, which would be a lower grade with a cinema camera with a full frame sensor. And I was like, there's no way they would ever do that because that just doesn't make sense from the C70 standpoint. But it makes a lot of sense now. The C70 is a bigger body. It's really dialed in with ND filters and really good features. That's an incredible camera. And now this R5, which is still very much a photo camera, but it also is now finally a camera that we can shoot video and really thrive, opposed to hitting kind of the limitations of having that photo ecosystem in it. All right, guys, that's enough talk. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with me? Is it a big deal? Is this just another Canon cripple hammer camera that they released? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, but obviously I'm very excited, and I'm kind of curious to see what the image looks like, because before we've always had this like DSLR / mirrorless look on these cameras, which isn't bad. It's just not the cine look. And I'm wondering, with the R5 sensor, are they going to be able to get more of a cinematic look with the video side of things with XFAVC and just some of the tweaks that they've made? Is it going to look more like a cinema camera than some of these earlier cameras? All right, guys, I'm landing the plane. This is it, I promise. Hope to see you soon, and leave me a comment about what you think about this camera. Thanks, guys. See you soon.